Hey there. Windows and Microsoft can sometimes have a bad reputation online for various reasons. This can lead some people to embracing Linux for home use. One common thought online, it seems, is that Linux is inherently more secure than Windows and more resistant to hackers and malware. But this isn't always the case. As such, I wanted to make a quick demo showing one example of why that for the average user, desktop Linux might just actually be a little bit easier to get hacked on than Windows. The inspiration to make this video happened when I came across these two videos by Pat Cyber Chronicles and Michael Horn. They go more in depth on the differences in security features. I won't do that in this video, so I'd recommend going and check their videos out too. I just wanted to do a quick demo on one of the simpler concepts in practice, and then show off some basic ethical hacking concepts while I'm at it. This isn't meant to be a Linux bad kind of video. I use Linux constantly, but I just wanted to show off a basic cybersecurity concept that I feel people should be aware of if they're not already. Okay, let's get started. So Windows has a lot of built-in security features and ones that are enabled and running by default. I'm on the Microsoft Windows security website right now. And if I scroll down here, you can see features including Microsoft Defender Antivirus, Smart Screen, the list goes on. In this video, all I really care about is Defender Antivirus. I can also go to my Windows security settings. And if I go to virus and threat protection, and under here, you can see that Microsoft Defender has been scanning my drive automatically in the background. I can go to virus and threat protection settings, and there's a lot of options here. Real-time protection is on by default. Even if you turn it off, it'll turn itself back on automatically. Def drive protection, tamper protection. There's a few sub-options here. So Windows has a few features in place that are trying to stop malware as soon as possible. The point being that Windows really tries to place strong guardrails for its users and on what is being ran on the computer. Most Linux distros, on the other hand, don't have these types of security mechanisms installed, enabled, and running by default. In particular, what I'm focusing on is something equivalent to something like Windows Defender Antivirus. Unlike Windows, Linux gives its users full control over the system, and it assumes that they know what they're doing. On a personal computer, besides maybe something like asking for a sudo password, Linux will let the user run whatever, no questions asked. Now, this can be a double-edged sword because what if you accidentally ran some malware? So, let's see this in action. I'll make some demo malware right quick. Disclaimer, this demo malware won't work over the internet in my configuration, and all things considered, this is extremely basic stuff in the penetration testing realm. If you try to do stuff like this against systems that you don't own and or have express permission to test on,
That's fucking illegal.
either way, I'm on Kali Linux right now, and this will act as my attacker machine, and I'll be using tools called Metasploit and MSFvenom to make my executables and manage incoming connections from my target back to Kali. I'll open a terminal window, and this is my command to make the Linux executable using MSFvenom. Important things here, it's a Meterpreter reverse TCP shell, and the actual file name will be linuxextractor.elf. I'll run this to generate the payload. When this file executes on a target machine, I should get full access to that computer remotely. I'm also running a demo locally hosted phishing site, which will host my malicious file and make the demo look pretty, but it's not needed, and I won't show how to set this part up though. Next, I'll run Metasploit and get it set up to receive inbound connections from a target once that file is executed. This video isn't supposed to be a tutorial on Metasploit or MSFvenom, I'm just showing the general process. I'll use the exploit multi-handler Metasploit module. Then I set the payload to match my malicious file. Then I set IP and port to my Kali info. And lastly, I'll run this listener. Okay, now Metasploit is just waiting for inbound connections. Everything is set up, so I can head on over to an Ubuntu instance. I'm on Ubuntu Desktop 25.10, which is the latest release at the time of this video. I'll head to my fake demo site and download that file that I created. I'll just download this. It pops up in my downloads. We'll need to make this executable, and then I should be able to run it. Okay, so I ran the program. I'll head back to Kali now. And just like that, you can see that a interpreter session was opened. I'll run getuid, and I can see that my shell is open as my user from Ubuntu. I'll run sysinfo, and you can see I'm in Ubuntu. Now, it's important to note that this shell is literally full remote access to Ubuntu from Kali, so anything my user account from Ubuntu can do or access, I can access from Kali. I chose Ubuntu first just because it's probably the most well-known distro, but just for fun, I can repeat these steps on CachyOS. I get a shell. I'll even do a vanilla Arch Linux install. And I get a shell, by the way. Okay, I can repeat this process on Windows 11 now to see the difference. I'll make a simple executable again with MSFvenom. Similar command as before. Only differences now is that it's for Windows and the payload flag, and then it's an exe file instead of an elf. Generation complete. I need to make a slight change to my Metasploit listener. I'll change the payload option to match my new Windows payload. But nothing else needs to change, so I'll run this. And again, it's waiting for connection, so I can head over to Windows 11. Same thing as before, I can download it from my fake phishing site. I would download and try to run it. This time I see a smart screen pop up. I'll do more info, and I can see it's warning me about my Windows extractor.exe. I'll run it anyway. Then I get a pop-up. Windows security threat found. Microsoft Defender antivirus found threats. And another pop-up right here saying it failed to run the file due to a virus. Interestingly, if I go to downloads, I can see that Windows has already removed that file from my downloads folder. And if I go to Windows security, I can go to protection history, and I see threat was quarantined. And Windows Defender did its job. It quarantined my file because it flagged it as a Trojan and associated it with Meterpreter, which is the payload that I was using. And if I go to learn more, I can see that Defender added this detection almost 9 years ago, actually. Of course, if I turn off Defender, I can run the program without issue, though. So I'll turn Defender off. I'll try to download my file again. And I'll run this. Smart screen still did a pop-up, but I'll run anyway. And if I go back to Kali, I can see that I got a shell. We're going to get UID to see the user that my shell is running as, and then sysinfo. And it's running on Windows. So I have remote access to my Windows 11 system. But just to reiterate, this simple payload was only successful because I turned off Defender's protections. Again, this isn't supposed to be a Linux bad kind of video. For more techie people, this was probably already obvious. But even if you are already more familiar with Linux than the average person, maybe it was interesting to actually see some practical examples. Keep in mind, there are a lot of ways to get hacked, and the example I showed was just an extremely basic phish and an extremely basic payload directly downloaded by a user through a web browser, which led to remote access. Modern attacks are usually going to be more complex and or require antivirus evasion techniques, so don't get it confused. I don't want to imply that Windows Defender makes Windows inherently safer and or better than Linux for home use. Not at all. Windows users get hacked all the time, and there's like a whole section of cybersecurity research dedicated to figuring out new ways to bypass Windows Defender and other antivirus solutions. But just an important note is that the malware in my demo made 0 attempts at antivirus evasion and is easily detectable. However, since by default, Linux assumes that I know what I'm doing and will let me run whatever, my basic program had no issues running on updated or freshly installed desktop Linux systems. Even in a perfect scenario, endpoint antivirus is just one level in a multi-tier defense and depth security posture. And keep in mind that if AV successfully blocked an attack or program, a lot of times that means that an end user had already did something that they probably shouldn't have. And a lot of attacks can be prevented with just good old common sense on the internet. And luckily for Linux desktop users, most hackers are probably going to be making their malware aimed at Windows users just due to market share differences and them not wanting to waste time on a much smaller portion of the user base. However, that's just security through obscurity, and that's not actually security. But there's nothing stopping any Linux user from adding extra security configurations and programs to their systems if they wanted. Well, that's about it for the video. Hopefully you learned something.